Jocko,
What's happening, man?
good to sit down with you again.
Indeed.
We're just going to make this an annual occurrence.
Sounds good.
It's a new tradition. How long have you been involved with immersion camp? Is it a couple of years, or is this your third year
I
now?
think this is my third year now.
Okay, yeah. This is amazing.
I think it might only be my second, though.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
yeah. Yeah, it's amazing, and to see how many.
It is my third year.
Your
'Cause the
third year.
first year we were at a different camp, and then last year we were at this new camp, and we're at this new
Oh,
camp.
that's right.
again.
It was
So that's
across
3 years. Yep.
across the lake last time. I had a
Yep.
buddy that actually went to the wrong camp last year because he pulled up the address for the camp from the previous year,
Right.
and it was like 2 a.m.
Yeah, that's
Calls
not
me up.
fun.
He's like, "Where are you guys at?" I'm like, "Just down the road on the left." He's like, "I see nobody," and we found out that he was across the lake.
Yeah, that's not a good situation for him.
Yeah, so we got him. We picked him up. All was well.
Good.
Yeah. What do you think about the camp so far?
It's awesome. Yeah, I wish I was, 12 years old and I was just here for the entire summer doing this for summer camp. That would be cool.
This is an amazing camp. I
Yeah.
mean, it really is. I know I brought my, you met my family, my kids,
Yeah.
and they came out here. They were like, they were in heaven. Forget about Disneyland. It's like, come to the lake, come to camp,
Oh, for
hang out
sure.
over here.
But if you could do this as a kid, if you had, whatever it is, 8 weeks of just jiu-jitsu, and I'm sure you could throw some other cool stuff in there, but that would be really, really good for
Yeah.
kids would really like that.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's something that's probably needed. The physicality, the contact, the toughness, the grittiness, the mental resilience and fortitude that it seems to me that less and less kids are getting these days.
I don't know. I think, with my kids and the kids I see my kids hanging around with, there seems to be plenty of that.
Well, that and that's a good point, and that is an indicator to me that you're introducing that into their lives, or you have the right people around you.
I guess maybe we just all kind of merge together because everyone has the same kind of interest, but jiu-jitsu and wrestling and surfing and just general being outside, getting after it seems to be the normal for the kids that my kids are with hanging out.
Yeah. I know it's been a big change since we moved here to Maine about 3 months ago now. We just kick them outside and they run around. The other day we had these hatchet targets that we had made for one of our events. And the other day I looked outside of the window and I saw my boys tearing it apart. And at first I was like, hey, I was going to yell at them, like, don't tear those boards apart. And I'm like, no, that's actually what they should be doing because they were making a fort.
Yeah, break stuff.
That's exactly
and
right.
build something else.
That's what they did. They tore it apart. They grabbed my screwdriver from downstairs, my drill, tore it all apart, built a fort. They were hanging out, roughhousing with each other. It's good to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty normal.
Yeah. Well, it should be. I think that's the avenue these kids need,
Yeah,
for sure.
I was when my son had like a kid sleep over his house, and they slept outside. And we live in California, but they slept outside in a tent out in the yard, basically. And then I woke up in the morning and worked out or whatever, and I was inside talking to my wife, and then I go outside and they had built a fire.
Oh, really?
And they were cooking bacon.
They just put it on a rock?
No,
or what did
they
do?
had got a pan.
Oh, okay, yeah.
A
on the
cast
fire.
iron pan, and they were cooking. Yep, they were cooking bacon for themselves in a little fire in the backyard.
That's
so.
got to be against some sort of ordinance in
I'm
California.
sure it is, but
Who cares? Get it done.
No one said anything, so we're good.
That's
And
funny.
besides,
That's good to see.
you need bacon.
That's
and
an
clearly
absolute
they
must.
needed bacon. Yeah,
Yeah, it wouldn't be camping if you didn't have that.
exactly.
For sure. So you got a lot going on, man. As always, you've got a new book coming out soon. I think it's in January.
Yep.
Right? So it's
Yep.
coming
It's
up
not
here
coming
soon.
out until January.
How often do you write? Are you writing every day? I think we talked a little bit about this a couple of days ago.
Yeah. Yep. I'm either writing or editing every day.
Is that something that if you always enjoy I should ask this. Do you enjoy that process now?
For me, writing is just the mechanics of getting the things that I have in my brain onto paper. So it's not something that I'm all excited because I get to write this thing, because the process of thinking about it has already taken place in my head. So now it's just a mechanical drill. It's literally like a mechanical drill for me to put the words into the computer, right? So I do it for like an hour. I try and only write for an hour at a time, because other than that I don't like it after that,
Yeah.
because sitting at a computer is never fun. But you have to do it. You have to do it. And there's times where I force myself to write, or like if I have a podcast, I force myself to make the podcast. And that's just the way it is. And if you don't force yourself to do it, sometimes you're going to miss out on a lot of good stuff. I've written some stuff that's good, really good stuff that I really like myself. And I know for a fact that I sat down and forced that information out of my brain, you know.
Sure.
So it's better when, like writing a book, I already have the basic outline and I'll have that written out. So for instance, if I'm writing one of the kids' books, I have all the chapters already done. I already know the story. The chapters are done, and I have 1, 2, maybe 3 sentences at most of what each chapter is about. And then, so when I sit down, I already know what I'm writing. I mean, I know what's going to happen, and I just have to put those words.
Sure.
For the leadership books, same thing. I will have, 1, 2, or 3 sentences. Oh, this is what this section's about. So boom, I sit down and I start writing, and that's that. It's just that's how it goes. So, do I like it? I don't hate it. I hate it if I ever got backed into a corner, if I'm behind on something and I have to write for 2 or 3 or 4 hours. I don't like that. But doing an hour is fine.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you talk about that, because I think there's a lot of people who believe that if it's the right path, that it's supposed to be easy, or they won't ever have a problem, or they won't ever lack any sort of motivation or discipline to get the thing done. And I've found that even though I feel like I'm on the right path, there's days where, I have to force myself to do a podcast, or to send out emails, or to sit down and write a few words, or send an email out to people, even though it's on the path that I feel like I'm supposed to be on.
Yeah, I don't think anything that's worth doing is really going to be easy all the time.
Right.
Because then everyone would be doing it.
It might be
I
fun
guess,
for an hour or something.
Yeah. But it does, at the end result, there's nothing better for me. And I think this is actually just a broad statement about my whole life at this point in my life. There's really nothing more gratifying than the little kids that, whether a parent comes up and shows me a video of a little kid that's doing his first pull-up, or a little girl that's taking jiu-jitsu, or a little kid that's studying flashcards. That's about as good as it gets, because to know that this little kid is on a good trajectory for their life, that I had something to do with, that's really good. Because, I meet adults all the time that are like that, because we teach leadership. So it's like, oh yeah, we really helped the business. We turned around and I've been promoted, and we took over this sector of the business, or we moved into a new area of operations, or whatever they're going to say. And they're super happy about it. And that's awesome.
Sure.
But when it's coming from a little kid, it definitely feels that's a pretty good feeling for me.
When you started Echelon Front, was that your first venture outside of the military?
Yes.
So when you started Echelon Front, did you have any idea that it would start going down this path of writing kids' books and some of this?
Nope.
Is this something that was ever on your mind?
No.
How did it evolve into that?
How did it evolve into the whole kids' books
How
thing?
did it, maybe
or
evolve
just
is
how
not the
did
right
the
word,
whole
but
thing
how did that
just-
come about?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because I was in the military, and I was, a few months from retiring, and a guy asked me if I wanted to talk. A guy that I knew, he was the CEO of a big company. He asked me if I could talk to his executives about leadership. I went and did it. When I got done, he came up to me and said, "Hey, I want you to talk to all my divisions." Because he was a little bit surprised, I think, because, he probably thought I was going to get up and, do whatever a stereotypical vision of what a Navy SEAL is going to do with a group, right?
Sure.
When I didn't, I talked about actual leadership and how you can transform an organization through leadership and that kind of thing. And so when I got done, he had a little bit of a surprised look on his face. Maybe he had low expectations, which is fine. But then he said, "Hey, I want you to do this for every division." I started going through his divisions and doing, teaching them leadership. And then at one of those divisional meetings, the CEO of the parent company was there. When I got done, the CEO of the parent company, he came up to me and said, "I want you to talk to all my CEOs," because he owned like 45 or 50 companies. And I said, "Cool." Then I did that. And as soon as I talked to 45 or 50 companies, whatever it was, a bunch of those CEOs came up to me and said, "Hey, can you come and talk to my company? Can you come and talk to my company? Can you come and talk to my company?" And at that point, Leif, my business partner at Echelon Front, and my brother and my former platoon commander that worked for me at SEAL Team 3 Task Unit Bruiser, he just gotten out of the Navy, and he was like looking for the next thing he was going to do. He was thinking about going to law school, and I don't know if I talked him out of it, but I might have talked him out of it.
Leif was going to go to law?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, for sure.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he got into, I forget which, he got into a really good law school, and
Interesting.
he was going to go. And then, I don't know, I forget the actual story, but, he came to a decision that that's probably not going to be. Look, he didn't actually want to be a lawyer. It just seemed like, okay, what do you do?
Here's a path.
He's went to the Naval Academy. He was in the surface fleet. He was in the SEAL teams. He was a platoon commander. He was an executive officer. I mean, had a great career, but then he had gotten out because he'd gotten married and all that. And so what was he going to do? And it seemed like, okay, well, you can either go get your MBA, go to law school, here, kind of like that. Just
what
kind
you're
of
supposed to do,
the standard path.
Right.
Yeah. And luckily, the timing was good. And all of a sudden I had a demand to do more of this. And, I said, hey, man, you want to come and get some? And he's like, check, so that's, and then from those events that we were doing, boom, we start going and we start having a high demand. And the cool thing was zero advertising of any kind.
Right.
We didn't spend one single penny on that. It was all word of mouth. And then from all those events that we were doing, people were asking us, do you have this stuff written down anywhere? Do you have a document, a manual you can give us? So we wrote down kind of the general ideas, which I had actually already done in the SEAL teams. I had already put together the leadership doctrine for the SEAL teams.
That was your role, right?
Yeah, that was the last thing I did. Yeah, so they were making. There was a guy that had been appointed to make more doctrine for the SEAL teams because we didn't have any, and I did a lot of contributions to the leadership portion, and so I'd already kind of done it once, and then Leif and I got together and like, hey, here we go. We get to, talk about these principles that we used and describe, and then that got to a literary agent. Literary agent said, "Cool, this is a book, and you never know how good a book is going to do when it goes to the market. Literally, no one knows.
Right?
No one knows, and you have no control over it. The public is its own random entity, and." So I thought, okay, well, we'll probably be giving this book away to people after we talk to them. That's kind of what I figured. You do the best you can, but I'm not arrogant enough to think that I'm going to write something that all these people are going to want to read, right?
Yeah.
So the first, when you write a book, we asked the publisher. I said, what's a successful book? We had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And because you've written a book, but when you think best-selling book, people might think that means 1 million copies or whatever.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah.
And because I just had no idea.
Right.
And I mean, the closest thing I would relate to it growing up as a kid, like, oh, if a record was successful, if it was a gold record or a platinum record or whatever, then it was 1 million copies. So I figured something like that.
That was the number.
Well, actually, a successful book is 20,000
right,
copies.
Significantly less than a million.
If they say, so we asked him, said, what's he says, if this is successful, we can look at doing it. And I'm like, what's successful? Mm-hmm. And he says, if you get to 20,000 copies sold, that's a successful book.
How quickly did you get there?
Oh yeah, we got there fast.
I bet.
We sold that in, I think it might even been, I forget the numbers for each, for each individual book, but yeah, we completely blew that out of the water, and we've sold a couple million copies of that book and then the other books as well.
Yeah.
So that was all good to go. Now, while that book was getting ready to be released, I already had Way of the Warrior Kid in my head outlined.
Really?
And I'd actually written 2 chapters, and the rest of the chapters kind of like a book proposal.
Do you mind if I interrupt you with that real quick? Is why was that in your head? Because I understand there's crossover for sure, but why have this extreme ownership and then this other project that is related in a way but different in your head?
Okay,
where did that come from?
Just FYI, there's so many projects in my head at any given time that literally I'll never be able to do them all.
Okay, yeah.
And that actually bothers me. There's like great, not even, I don't know if they're great or not, but there's things in my head that want to get out, and I know I won't have time to do them all, and it bothers me. But some of them bubble to the surface, and that one, if you think about Way of the Warrior Kid, how no one had written a Way of the Warrior Kid book is completely crazy. The book is
a good point now that you say that.
Yeah,
right.
It's even when I originally started telling my close friends about it. One of my really good friends, who's a civilian, but he's a writer in the civilian sector, and he said, I cannot believe you thought of this. This is ridiculous. He was just beside himself. And that's kind of the way I felt too. So anyways, I present this book to my publisher, and my publisher is like, hey, look, you're a leadership guy, a military guy. This is really kind of, for lack of a better word, off-brand or whatever they say.
Right.
And, you don't really want to do this right now. And so I was kind of, I didn't really know what to think of that. So anyways, I kept writing it. And then my publisher said, okay, so then here's what happened. I started working on the Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual, which is, because then I had started the podcast, and then I started realizing, hey, people really need this kind of basic information about not what their operating system should be like, but at least what mine is like, so that they can go, okay, I get what he's doing here. Maybe that's not me, but I can at least take a step in that direction. And the reason I knew that was because all the questions that I was getting all the time. So I said, okay, I'm gonna write this Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual, and I'm just gonna publish it myself, so I don't have to deal with the publishing world. And so then my editor at my publishing at the publishers, I don't want to say my publishing company because that's my publishing company, but
the one you were working,
the one I was working with, and I still am working with them, but he listened to my podcast all the time, and he would send me a text that would say, oh, that was such a good podcast, oh, that was awesome. And so finally he sends me one that says, these podcasts, this information that you're putting out, it's another book. And I wrote back like, yeah, I know, and I'm putting it together and I'm gonna publish it. And he says, call me, and because he's completely freaking out now that I'm gonna self-publish a book.
That's what he's worried about.
Oh because you're a New York Times best-selling author. Right. You are not allowed. You can't do this. This is crazy. And so we talk on the phone, and I said, cool. You want to publish this book? You publish my kid's book.
Right.
And he was like, okay. And he actually sent Way the Warrior Kid to this really powerful children's publisher inside the same company.
Okay.
And she read it, and they made an offer to me 20 minutes later.
Is that right?
Yeah. She really loved it. Boom. So that was that. And that's how the kids book kind of started. And then from there I made the second kids book, and then Discipline Equals Freedom came out, and then the kids book came. I think the kids book came out first. Anyways,
before Discipline Equals Freedom.
Before Discipline Equals Freedom, because I think I told them the kids book comes
You're
first.
Gonna do that first.
Yep. And then so that was then the kids series, and then Mikey and the Dragons was one of those ideas that popped up and into my head. And
do you remember reading Mikey and the Dragons last year?
I do.
That was a crazy experience for me, because we're sitting in the chow hall over here, and you've got all these guys, these badass guys, and we're sitting around, and you're reading a kid's book.
Yeah.
But I gotta tell you, man, to see you read it and how much energy you had in reading it, you were into it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you told us, you're like, don't take video. Yeah. And I don't know if anybody did or not, but there might have been something leaking around. I don't know, but it was pretty cool to have you read that kid's book.
I have people on a regular basis that say, especially dads, they'll say, I cried when I read the letter from the king
to his son.
Yeah, because that's you think about that. That's what it boils down to. If your job as a dad, you leave this is what you leave. These are your instructions to your kid, and that's kind of going to hit anybody when you start thinking about what you leave behind, because you leave behind a bunch of thoughts and a bunch of attitude. But if you try and encapsulate all that into one letter, that's what that is.
Right.
And it's a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's where the kids books, and plus obviously I have 4 kids. So I've been through all these, all the trials and tribulations of raising kids, and the little things that I did with my kids, the things that I did well, the things that I didn't do well, and taking the things that I learned from the SEAL teams and really seeing how well it applies to being a kid, to raising a kid, how these simple principles and these simple attitudes help kids so much. So it was in there, it was in the brain, and I had to let it out.
I like it, man. I mean, I can tell just from you having met my kids the other day and seeing you interact with other children, there's something there. I made that post on Instagram, he's almost smiling. Yeah, I think he smiles around kids.
Yeah, I do smile around kids, because kids are better than adults generally. Yeah. Yeah,
they haven't been, what's the right word? They haven't been indoctrinated into
Yeah.
some of these other things that we get into at times, or the things that we worry about that they frankly don't worry about or aren't a concern of theirs.
Yeah. Kids' minds are open. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so you start writing these kids books. You got these other books. One of my thoughts is how you seem to be somebody who does what you want to do. You know what you want to do. You do it. How much consideration do you pay attention to when it comes to the way it's going to be perceived or received from other individuals? Is that a factor? Is that something you think about? Or is it, hey, I'm just going to put my stuff out in the world, and if people like it, cool. If not, cool.
Yeah, no, I'm not too concerned about what other people are thinking. I mean, like with the podcast, everyone's got their little formulaic things on how to make a good successful podcast, and I don't follow any of them, so that's one example. I don't really care. I'm not too concerned about it. To me, I'm just doing what I think feels what I do. I'm doing what I want to do, basically.
Right.
That's what it is. I'm not doing what other people want me to do. That's
I think
for
that
sure.
comes, yeah. I think that that sense of confidence and knowing what you want comes across, and that's probably one of the reasons that it's so attractive to people, is because they see somebody who's living life on his terms, and in a lot of ways, a lot of people don't have that. They feel like they're beholden to a job or to their spouse or to society or a million of other things, which is why I think people.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way,
like
you are beholden to your spouse and your job and your family, and those things are kind of good. But
well, if you volunteer for
I know
those
what
things,
you're saying.
right? Like,
yeah,
like I have a responsibility to my wife and kids because I signed on the dotted line that says I will be responsible for my wife and kids.
yeah,
So that's a choice I made. That isn't something that's just by default something that happened to me. I think a lot of people think that is that this circumstance happened to me and I don't want to be in this situation, and now nothing I can do about it, so I'll just throw up my hands and live life the way, again, quote unquote, I'm supposed to.
yeah. Check.
Yeah. So you've got a new hobby now.
Yeah. We got really lucky, and John Dudley, who's one of the best archery individuals and one of the best archery hunters probably in the world, right?
I would say yes.
He's friends with Joe Rogan. I'm friends with Joe Rogan. He saw me on Joe Rogan's podcast. I met him randomly in an airport in New Jersey. We were laughing about that.
Oh, really?
And I didn't really know who he was. And, it was kind of a normal, like someone says, "Hey, Jocko." And so I turn around and he says, "Hey, I'm John Dudley. I'm friends with Rogan, blah, blah, blah." We have a quick conversation. But anyways, to make a long story short, he's a great guy. I mean, he's just a great guy. And he wanted me. He thought I would really like archery and bow hunting. So
Why? What was his thought?
I don't know. He just thought he thought I'd like it. Because I was in the military and I like, shooting things, obviously, and sneaking around in the woods. That's what I wanted to do and done my whole life.
Right.
So he kind of put two and two together. That doesn't take a rocket science to figure out. And so he thought I'd like bow hunting. When he was doing an event in San Diego, California, and so when he was out there, he built me a bow and he brought it out there and he gave me a 3-hour private lesson in introduction to how to shoot a bow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. And then, I've spent the last, and I unfortunately I was injured for a good chunk of time, but then as soon as my elbow healed up, my knee healed up, and I could start. Really my elbow, because if you've ever heard me say, when people say, "What do you do when you get injured?" I always say, "You do what you can." Well, when you can't use your left, I couldn't fully extend my left elbow, and there was really just nothing I could do to shoot a bow or to get better at bow hunting.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to extend your arm.
Yeah,
That's obviously.
Now maybe if I had some permanent disability where I had to reconfigure and figure out a new way, then learn some, adapt, then maybe that's a different story for me. But to say, okay, this is what I should be doing, I can't do it, just needed to wait until it healed. So finally, when that was healed up, I started shooting all the time and ended up going to the archery challenge, the Total Archery Challenge, and we had a great time at that. And then we're going on a bow hunt here in October for elk in Utah.
How you feeling about it?
I'm super super excited about it. I think I'm getting like there's no better way. This is the ultimate first class experience that I'm getting.
Yeah. If you're gonna do it, you're doing it
it's
right.
totally ridiculous to learn directly from John Dudley, to have John Dudley build me a bow and build all my arrows, and then personally coach me, and then personally take me out in the hills and shoot 3D targets and coach that whole thing, and then personally take me on an elk hunt in one of the best places in the whole world to hunt elk. It's a
It's
ridiculous
okay.
first class experience that I mean I'm I'm just kidding. It's awesome. Yeah.
You said lucky, but I don't know if it's luck. I mean, I think a lot of what you've created up to your life has created these opportunities, right? Without some of the things that you've done in the past, you wouldn't maybe have the same opportunities that you do now.
Yeah, sure. And I'm lucky that I'm lucky that I had the chance to create a bunch of these opportunities for sure.
Why do you say that? Like, why do you use that word lucky?
Well, I'm lucky to be here,
Here, alive or in
alive,
America or
right?
what?
Yeah, all the
Both.
above. Yeah, lucky to be here, lucky to, you know, be alive, lucky to live in America. Yeah, been lucky. Lucky, I had things happen in my life that were luck, like that put me in the position that I was in where I had the opportunity to learn, I had the opportunity to milk people's brains around me and absorb things and then take the things that I learned, and was lucky enough to be in situations and places in the world that I had the opportunity to put those things to the test. And then when I got done with that, I had the opportunity to go and teach those things and really solidify and crystallize them in my own head and see how they impacted other people over and over and over again. So there's luck, man. I
No
mean,
doubt.
and
Yeah.
I get it. Like, you make your luck, and I believe me, I'm a believer in that because I'm a hard worker, and there's no luck in hard work. But there's you're lucky.
There's things that
You were
are
in combat overseas, right? There's no chance. I mean, there's no doubt that if you can get unlucky and you can get killed or you can get severely wounded, and you can get lucky and you can be okay. And so that's what it is. You have to at least give a little credit to luck. You make your own luck, of course, but you
That's
have
where
to give
that
a little bit.
dichotomy comes in, though,
Yep.
right? I mean,
Yep.
and I like that approach because you seem pretty even keel with that. Because a lot of guys are like, "There's no luck ever." Like, well, there's some fortunate events that you can capitalize on,
Yeah.
or not, or miss,
Yeah.
right? But then there's some things that you create too. I can
Yeah.
definitely see both.
You were talking about my new book, but I talk a little bit about how I learned what I learned, and the lucky parts of that. Having certain leadership that I worked for, good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually lucky I had bad leaders sometimes, because it woke me up and made me start observing when I was really young to say, why don't I want to follow this guy? Why does everyone not like this guy as a leader? What's going on with this person? And then get a good leader, get lucky enough, because it's a roll of the dice.
Right.
What your platoon commander's like
Sure.
in a SEAL team.
Sure.
It's people might think, oh, everyone's great in the SEAL teams. No, you get people that are bad leaders, you get people that are good leaders. And so I went really really lucky in one case in particular. I had a really bad leader, and we had a mutiny, and he got fired.
I remember you saying that last time.
And then I had a really good leader. And so that's an example of, I was really lucky that happened. Because if I would have had a mediocre leader that didn't get fired, I would have thought, okay, that's how you lead, and it seems to work. And so, okay, there's my example.
Right.
And like I said, there's luck involved in the fact that I got this really bad guy and then this really good guy, and I got to see the contrast, and the contrast of two different opposing things makes it really obvious. The delta between these things, you go, oh, wow, this is really different. Okay, now I understand.
But do you think? Well, let me ask it this way. There has to be some level of awareness between the difference of the two leadership styles in this case, for example. A lot of people I don't think have that awareness, and they don't put the two things together. Have you always had that?
Yes, and that, you're right, that is not luck. I was attuned to it. And the more I paid attention to it, the more attuned to it I got.
Sure. Yeah, it's a skill, I imagine, right? Something you develop is being aware, trying to figure things out, wondering why this is going the way it is. A lot of people aren't asking those questions.
And actually, and this is another thing I talk about in my new book, is I wasn't really that great naturally at anything, at any normal skill. So in the SEAL teams, there's guys that are really good shots, there's guys that are really fast, there's guys that are really strong, there's guys that are great, parachute jumpers or great divers. And I was good at everything. I didn't really have any major weaknesses or shortfalls, but in a SEAL platoon, you're doing pistol shooting, and I might, if we do a little competition, I might get 5th in the platoon of 16 guys. I might get 3rd. I might get 7th. Whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't the guy that was like number 1.
Right.
Because the number 1 and 2 guys, they're number 1 and 2 every single time, on a run. Like, there's guys that I might come in, 8th or 12th or whatever. So the thing that I realized was, hey, those are good skills to have, but that made me pay attention to other things that were going on. And what I realized, the thing that I could actually do pretty well was lead. It was, and really it wasn't, I didn't jump all the way to, hey, I can lead well. Because the first thing was I realized that I could take a step back and I could look at what was going on, and then I could figure out what to do next. I didn't really think that was leadership. I thought it was just tactically, I'm good at making calls.
Sure.
I'm good at assessing situation and making a call. I didn't really think of that as
you
leadership
didn't put it
in
into
the broad,
that, right.
Because, I was a young E4 in a SEAL platoon, a new guy. It doesn't matter. And then, so that was assembled with the fact that I started realizing, hey, when I interact with other people, I kind of can get a feel for what they're thinking, and that's a really good thing to be able to understand what people are thinking, and then how to kind of get them to see what you're thinking and maybe even agree with what you're thinking. So all those little things, eventually I looked down at my, past and said, oh, all these things, you combine them all together, that's leadership. And that's something that I might not be great at it, but I'll tell you what, I'm better at that in comparison to where I would rank as a pistol shot or a rifle shot. So let me focus on this, let me pay attention, let me continue to learn. And I also realized, especially from that good and bad SEAL platoon leader, that's what's going to be the most impactful thing in a SEAL a SEAL platoon.
No doubt.
Is that if you have a good leader, it's going to be good. Hey, everyone's going to be able to shoot. No one's going to miss the target.
At that stage, you're working with the best of the best.
Yeah.
These are all.
We're not worried about people missing the target. We're not worried about people not being in good enough physical condition to go for the patrol, But if you have bad leadership, yeah, you can have some problems.
No doubt. There's people out there, a lot of people, who believe that you're a natural leader, and you're kind of talking about that now, is that you have some natural talents and abilities that lend to that fairly well. Was there ever a point in your time or in your life where you felt like a little bit of an imposter, or you aren't worthy of the leadership position that you're in, or you felt uncomfortable in those situations?
Of course, there are situations like that, but I actually recognize that, and I tell this to people all the time, like, if you feel like you're not ready to lead, or you feel like an imposter, then that's actually a good thing, because that means you're humble enough to say, okay, I need to pay attention. I need to listen to what other people are saying. I'm not perfect. I can probably make some mistakes, and I probably will make some mistakes, and I will make some mistakes. So I felt that way from time to time, but I realized that, hey, it's okay. That's you keeping yourself in check.
Yeah.
When I got to Iraq on my very first deployment to Iraq, the senior enlisted advisor who showed up a little bit before me, and he's a great guy and he's a great friend of mine. We grew up together as E5s at SEAL Team 1, but now he was the senior enlisted advisor, and I was a platoon commander, and he was the task unit senior enlisted advisor. So when I showed up, he had been on the ground for a little while, and he had done the push-up, so he had some combat experience, which none of us had. And so we got there, and like the first night that we were there, we got spun up to go and look for a mortar team, and we launched the vehicles. And, at the time I was kind of saying, okay, this is, pay attention to what's going on. And I felt like, I don't want to say I felt out of my league, but I was okay, here we go. And when I got back, we went out, we didn't find anybody. We came back, and, he said to me, I wanted to get you outside the wire, basically like there was a mortar launch. We were never going to catch this guy, but he just wanted to get me outside the wire. And at that point, even on that first mission, I'd never, done anything that real before, because I'd done little shipboardings and stuff like that. But no, I'd never done any land warfare combat operations, and I was out there and I was like, yeah, I'm ready for this. It wasn't this overwhelming thing, and I felt comfortable.
Yeah, man,
we trained hard, and I paid attention, and I listened to my elders in the teams to be ready for that moment.
I think it's a great point in that if you're worried about being an imposter, it's probably a pretty good indicator that you care about being there.
For sure.
Because if you were indifferent, that's either a sign of arrogance or indifference, and I think both are a problem.
Yeah, I can tell you all the time when I was running training for SEAL platoons, any platoon commander that thought he deserved to be there usually sucked. And the guys that were asking me questions and wondering, hey, what can I do better here? Those were the guys that were awesome. And that was always the truth. Maybe every once in a while you'd get somebody that was a little bit cocky, but still just was a good leader and a good operator. That was very rare. And occasionally you'd get a guy that was nervous because they sucked. And they
knew it maybe a little bit.
They knew that,
Right.
and it was hard to correct them because they didn't have the capacity to lead in that domain.
How do you take an individual like that and recognize that? And when do you know, okay, this is somebody we've got to make some changes with, or this is somebody we have to develop?
Yeah, and well, this is the most interesting part of that. If the guy's not humble and they're not good tactically, they're not going to change, and you might as well just fire them
Because they're shut down.
because they're not going to listen to you.
Okay.
They think they already know everything. If the person's humble, then you can work with them and try and get them up to speed, and hopefully they can overcome some of their weaknesses. Hopefully you can put some people around them that are better at some of their soft or weak areas, and then you can get them up to speed and they work out. Sometimes people just can't do it, Sometimes people can't do it. Some people get overwhelmed by whatever's going on, right? There's you go into a room, there's lots of shooting going on, there's mayhem, there's people screaming. That can be overwhelming for people. Now you can get better at it over time, but some people, they start at such a low level of being able to handle that kind of thing that they don't get to where we need them to be, and they would get fired.
It's it's interesting with your position in the SEALs because at some point you may not be able to fire as easily, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, as easily as somebody in the civilian space that's working for you. But I imagine a lot of that's weeded out by the time they get to the level where you're working with them. Is that accurate?
I mean, sure, you in the beginning of SEAL training, all kinds of people get weeded out. And then when you get to the SEAL teams, less people get weeded out, but they still get weeded out. And the thing is, in the civilian sector, and we work with civilian companies all the time, you can't just fire people in the civilian sector. That's what I thought. It's funny, I thought, hey, in the civilian sector, obviously, if you work for me and you're,
I can fire you.
I'll just fire you. But that's not true. If you work with companies, guess what? They've got HR. You literally can't fire people.
True.
You've got unions. You've got all kinds of reasons why people can't
True,
get fired.
yeah.
And then the civilian people thought, well, it's easy in the military because in the military you can just fire. In the SEAL teams, you can just kick them out of the SEAL teams. It's the same exact things. You have to document. You have to counsel. You have to, and think about what you're doing when you fire somebody from a SEAL platoon, especially from an officer in a SEAL platoon. You're ruining their life. Both officer and enlisted. You're ruining their life if you kick someone out of the SEAL teams.
Yeah, it's going to follow them around.
People don't come into the SEAL teams and that wasn't their dream and their goal for their life. I mean, I would say there's a large percentage of people in the SEAL teams that is their goal. There's no beyond goal.
Right,
just,
that's
hey,
it.
I want to
That's
be a
life.
SEAL. That's life. And that was me. What did I want to do? I just wanted to be a SEAL. That's what I wanted to do. If I didn't make that, it wasn't like I said, well, I want to be a SEAL or do something else. No, it's just, I just want to be a SEAL. So when you fire someone from the SEAL teams, you're ruining their life. You're taking away their paycheck. You're taking away their mortgage. You're taking away their retirement. And you're destroying the dream that they've had their whole life. So it's a gnarly thing to do. And we did it. We did it on the regular. And the problem with you have to do it. Because if someone's a bad leader and they take troops into combat, there's a chance they're going to get themselves or other people killed, and there's just a no. You just have to get rid of them.
Well, I mean, that's one of your principles you've talked about. I think it was in Extreme Ownership, is the mission's first.
Yes.
And you went in depth with dichotomy of leadership,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
expand.
The mission is
right?
first, yes. Yeah. And if you decide that your mission is first and we're going to get this mission done, and then you sacrifice, half of your platoon to accomplish the mission, well, then you actually can't do any more missions.
Right.
So you didn't make a good call. So you have to balance executing the mission and at the same time taking care of your troops.
Yeah, no doubt. How is Leadership Strategy and Tactics, the field manual, how is that different than some of the other leadership books that you've written already?
The big difference is, when you read Dichotomy or you read Extreme Ownership, we are really spelling out the principles
Mm-hmm.
of what the core principles are of how you operate as a leader. The problem with it is, or not the problem, but that's what you get. You get these principles, these really profound principles that we have now tested in every single industry, in the largest companies in the world. I mean, the most valuable companies in the world, and at the same time, little tiny companies and individuals. So we know factually that these principles work, and they work well. But where some people, many people, have a hard time translating the principles to what they're doing right now today.
To applying those principles.
Applying those
Okay.
principles. So if you imagine, I think of on the cover of the new field manual, Leadership Strategy and Tactics, I took and I put the symbols from the FM 101 TAC 5 TAC 1, which is operational terms and graphics, which is, it's sort of like the X's and O's you might see on a football, on a play.
Right.
Where do you actually move the people? And the reason I use those, because that's what we use those in the military. This is where a platoon is, or a fire team is actually gonna set up. This is how we're actually gonna maneuver on the battlefield. And that's my way of saying this book is about how you actually maneuver. Like, we get cover and move. We get that. How do you actually do that? Some people can make the translation, but most people, many people I've found, I should say, have a hard time with that.
Sure.
And how do you translate that? And there's really simple things, really simple. So the book has about 80 chapters, in the book, and they're all pretty short, obviously, and because it's 80 chapters, but really straightforward things that you face as a leader. Like, how do you step in as a new leader? What do you do? Think about that.
Yeah.
Like, you just got promoted.
Right.
You're going to take over a division of a company with 18 people in it. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What are the steps? So that's the kind of thing. I've got one
That's
on,
good.
You've got a boss that is indefensible. Like they're doing things that make no sense whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that with your troops? What do you do? Because we're going to support our boss, but what if our boss is doing things that are indefensible? Right? So there's another one. I've got one about going overboard. So, you read
As an employee, is that what you're saying?
No, as a leader.
Oh, as a leader. Okay.
So I'm a young guy. I come in and I want to be a leader. And I read Extreme Ownership and I read the Dichotomy of Leadership, and I go in and I'm like, hey guys, this is about leadership. I'm the leader. We're listen to what I'm saying. This is how we're going to operate. And you go overboard. And I guarantee you that offends people. It offends people when you act like that. I talk about how to be chosen to lead. Like, what do you do if you're in a division or you're in a department and you want to be chosen to lead? How do you do that? What do you do to make that happen? I got one on knowing when to quit. Right? When do you quit? And I talk very plainly about probably the most commonly referred to SEAL mantra, which is never quit.
Never quit, sure.
That's great. Guess what? And the way I describe it in the book is I explain that, you get a young SEAL platoon commander or a young SEAL assistant platoon commander who's coming straight out of SEAL training. He has said never quit 10,000 times out loud to his team, to his buds class. He said it in his own brain a million times. In this suffering moments, he's never quit, never quit, never quit. Now we take him, he gets to my training, and I put him in a situation where it's going to be bad for his platoon or his assault force, where they're going to get killed. They're going to be assaulting, down a hallway with a barricaded shooter. And I got to see this over and over again because I would run this exact drill.
You created them.
Yeah, I created it. Here, you're going to go, okay, you got to clear this building. They enter the building. There's a barricaded shooter at the end of a hallway. Hey, 2 guys go. They get killed by paintball. What does the assault force leader do? 2 more guys go. What happens to them? They get killed. What does the assault force leader do? 2 more guys go. What happens to them? They get killed. But guess what his attitude? I'm never going to quit.
Right.
We're never going to quit. Gets everyone killed, including him as the last man. Like, okay, everyone's dead, but I'm going to make a charge. I'm never going to quit. And now he's killed his whole platoon. That is not what we want.
Right.
And it's not what you want to do in life. And it's not what you want to do in business. You have to assess what you're actually doing and say, okay, you know what? This plan that I came up with is not good.
It's not working.
And we need to stop. And, you know, in this scenario that I describe in the book, I would sit there. I'd let them die, of course. The first time I'd just let them die.
That's the point of the exercise.
That's the point of the exercise.
Right.
Very rarely would someone say, this is stupid, stop. Because our attitude is drilled into us so hard to never quit. When the reality is, someone that was good, or once I'd run this drill for them, I'd say, listen, you just got everyone killed. You failed. And that's not good. Next time, detach, take a step back, look around, see what other options there are. Because it's really easy. Guess what? All you have to do is exit the building, go around, throw a grenade through the window, and send 2 guys in through the window after a grenade, and a couple flash crashes go off, and you kill the barricaded shooter, and then you clear the building. It's that easy. And the answer is so obvious.
Yeah.
It's so obvious that people miss it. I noticed this the other day here at camp. I was watching a couple white belts that we had taught a move to.
You were probably watching me.
It may have been.
Because I know what scenario you're talking about.
I don't know if it is or not. But
just keep pushing, right?
No. This is different. I was watching, we had taught a move, and I was looking, and there was this pair that was doing this move, and something was wrong. And I was looking at them saying, what is wrong with this move? And the problem is they were doing completely wrong. They were doing it so wrong that I couldn't even see, because I was trying to overlay this one move, and they were it was unrecognizable to me, even though the answer was right in front of my face. And I literally took a step back, like a half a step, and just watched it one more time. And I go, oh, you guys have got your grips wrong.
Sure.
And you're moving in the wrong direction. Instead of moving towards the grip, you got the wrong grip, and you're moving
the wrong way.
Yeah, towards the grip instead of away from it. And it was just completely wrong. But I had to step back and look at it. Same thing. You know, you've got these scenarios unfolding. If you stay immersed in them, you're not going to be able to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to these guys. So that's the thing, like when to quit, you know, things like how to punish people, right? If you are a boss, how do you punish people? And I start off by saying, look, I almost never had to punish people. Literally almost never did I have to punish someone. Same thing with like my family. I don't have to punish my kids. I shouldn't say never, but very rarely do I have to punish my kids. If I have to punish someone, I'm pretty disappointed in my own leadership.
There might have been some issues leading up to that got to that point that you could have addressed a long time ago.
100%. It's definitely my fault. If I'm punishing someone, I made a mistake somewhere. Now, do you get someone that is bad and they knowingly violate rules and regulations?
Yeah, I have one of my 4 kids is like that every day of my life.
Yeah. So, and those kids, they might need to get punished. A guy in a platoon a guy in a business might need to get punished. But generally, if you are doing a good job as a leader, then you don't have to punish. Okay. Sometimes you do. Okay, then how do you administer that punishment? Figure that out. I got a whole section on ultimatums. Ultimatums in all different directions, right? If you work for me and I say, I want this project done by Thursday, or you're fired, right? What do you do? What do you do on the receiving end of that, right? And then here's the reverse. Hey, if I don't get promoted, I'm quitting. Okay, that's an ultimatum going up the chain of command. What do you do as a boss? How do you handle that?
Sure.
So I talk about those kind of things. I even talk about like, when do you yell as a leader? Which you can probably guess. I almost never yelled at anyone. Once again, if I have to yell at someone on my team, well then I've made a bunch of mistakes for me to have to yell. Now, if this doesn't count, we're in a machine gun fight and I've got to yell so that people hear me. This is I'm emotionally yelling. Occasionally, do you have to do it? Yes, occasionally you do have to do it. I probably yelled. I think in the book I say, you know, you could count on one hand. I think the reality is I think I yelled twice.
Is that right?
Yeah. When I was in a leadership position in a platoon or a task unit, I think I yelled twice, and it might actually, I know one time for sure. And Leif was with me. I wasn't yelling at Leif, but Leif was with me. And, you know, he tells the story funny because I needed to yell. Obviously, I hadn't made my point to a couple individuals, and I did make the point. And it was a calculated thing, and I talk about that in the book too. I wasn't yelling because I was mad. I was yelling because
you didn't lose control.
I yelled because I needed to get through some thick skulls that this behavior was wrong. So I yelled. So those are the kind of things, those kind of really tactical tactical
Scenario-based type
scenarios
things.
and how you actually maneuver on the battlefield of leadership. That's what this book is a little bit different. And of course you have to put these things together, right? You've got the leadership strategy and tactics. You've got to understand the principles so that you can make the tactics happen.
Right.
But that's the big difference on the book.
Did you get these scenarios because you said you had roughly 80 or whatever it is? Obviously, there's significantly more than that in life. Do these primarily come from listeners, readers, people who are asking these questions that keep getting brought up over and over again?
Almost all of them are somewhere on the podcast. Someone said, "Hey, what do I do? What do I do when my boss gives me an ultimatum?" Right?
Yeah.
How many times did I get that question?
I'm sure.
Right? And this is another thing that drove me to write the book is 3 years ago when I had 22 podcasts, I could say, "Hey, go listen to the podcast. You'll learn about leadership." Right now, if someone takes over a leadership position, I can't say, "Hey, go listen to
this number."
500 hours of content
Right.
to get your
that
answers."
one answer.
Right. It's not cool to do that. So I had to, for people that had these tactical questions about what strategies they should use, I had to put it together in a volume that's short enough. It's highly indexed, so you can just like look up.
Sure.
And you can just say, "Here's my problem."
3-1 or whatever.
Right. Somebody just called me a manipulator. What does that mean? Am I manipulating people if I'm doing this? It's like, okay, go look up manipulation, read it. You're good to go. Here's what happens.
Yeah, you're not going to read the entire thing through.
You don't need to read the entire thing through. Yeah, I guarantee people will, because I also set it up in a way I kind of start off telling the foundations of how I learned what I learned. And so that kind of lays the book out. But once people get through it one time, they're gonna go use it as a reference, as a field manual.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
I think it makes sense that, from the outside looking in, that you'd release this book now, because you've done a great job with the podcast and the other books, setting the foundation and the 30,000-foot view and the thought process behind it. Now it's like, okay, now that we have this base of why we're doing what we're doing, now let's implement that. Because I think a lot of people build that backwards. So just go, and they don't know why they're doing it, and we'll figure it out along the way. And obviously, there's a lot of collateral damage that comes with that.
You got to know where to move the X's and O's.
Sure. What do you attribute your level of success? Because not to take anything away from you and what you've created, but there's a lot of people who are great leaders and have done wonderful things and achieved a lot, and yet I look at you as someone who's created amazing success. What do you attribute that to?
Number one is I'm a hard worker. Straight up. And when I was in the SEAL teams, I was not, like I said, I wasn't great at anything, but I was a hard worker. And I would get to work before you, and I would stay at work after you. And if you were good at something, naturally, I would put in the work that I could actually compete with you. I might not ever get better with you, but I'll at least be able to hang. And so I'm working all the time. And I think when you work all the time, you have a better chance of doing things that are going to, well, I mean, just the volume of things that you're going to do is going to be higher than a normal person. I mean, how often do you put out your podcast?
Three times a week.
3 times a week. So I put out 1 podcast a week. It takes me between 10 and 20 hours to prepare the podcast.
I know the level of preparation that you go through.
Yeah.
I've seen some of that.
And so when I know for a fact there's not too many people that could do all the things that I'm doing and then get home from a 3-day trip where you're sleeping minimal hours and you're working with a client, and then you get home and it's Friday and you go, you eat some dinner with your kids, and then the kids are gonna go and walk to the beach or whatever. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go do podcast prep. And then the next morning I'm going to work out, and then I'm going to do podcast prep while the family's doing what they're doing. I'm going to, that night my wife's going to be looking at me like, "Hey, do you want to take a walk or something?" Nope, I'm going to be working. That's the way it is. So getting on a plane, when people get on a plane and it's like, cool, I got some time to veg out. For me, it's okay, cool. I get to read a book. I get to read and highlight and go through a book. So I think that's probably the number one thing is I just work hard. I work hard.
Why is this so important for you?
Well, like I said, I got a lot of things in my head that want to come out. And the other thing is now, just like any leadership position, if for me, when I'm in a leadership position, I know that everyone on the team is counting on me to do a good job. Everyone's counting on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you right now, that's what I feel now. There's people that are counting on what I'm doing. They're relying on it. They're counting on this podcast to come out. They're counting on a book to come out. They're counting on all the things that I'm doing. They're counting on it, and I don't want to let people down. There was a early on, probably less than a year into the podcast, I was saying to Echo, I said, hey man, I don't know if I can maintain this pace of doing a podcast every week. We might have to go to one every 2 weeks because I just don't have the time. And he was, he definitely didn't like that idea, but he understood it because he would see what I'm doing.
Sure.
And, I'd come home on a Friday night and I'd be leaving on Saturday and we'd go record.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just the way it was. And it's the way it is. I floated that idea past a couple people that the first guy I floated it past was actually a client that Ashlin Front was working with, and we were driving to a site where they had a project going on. And as we're driving, we're just talking about stuff, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about maybe going down to one podcast every 2 weeks. And his reaction was so bad.
Really?
He was kind of like, I mean, if you're going to do something like that, you got to let people know. I mean, you got to give people a heads up. That's not going to go over well, for people that are. And when I got that reaction from him, and this guy is a squared away leader in a big giant company, very, very successful. And when I saw that reaction from him, I said, this is bigger than you. This is bigger than your own life is not as important as everything you've got going on. These people, are counting on this, and you need to deliver.
You said something the other day as we had the opportunity to shoot some arrows together, and you said, I think I said something to the effect of, I can't imagine you get much time just to do these types of things alone. And you're like, doesn't matter. And to me, I heard what you're saying now, which is you signed up for this. Like, you voluntarily thrust yourself into this, and you've accepted the reality that you've got to give your time and attention, it seems like.
Yeah, the only part that I would say is I would counter is that I voluntarily thrust myself into this. I didn't predict that this was what was going to happen. I predicted, hey, okay, I wrote a book, cool, right?
It'll be a good experience.
It'll be cool,
yeah.
some people, or hey, I'm going to make a podcast talking about things I like to talk about. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I thought. I wasn't really aware of the direction that where things were going to go. And to your point that you asked me the other day, like, hey, does that get hard when because people want to talk to you, people want to ask you something, and it's like, no, like that's what it's become. Cool. I'm like happy to be able to be in this position and try and help people out and learn from them and teach what I know. So it's all good.
It seems to me you understand that that's part of, even though you're probably energized to some degree, that you realize that's part of the price to pay for being able to pursue this avenue that you've been able to do. Is that wrong?
I guess. It's weird, people ask me, we talk about planning, right? You got to plan, and that's how you run a military operation. That's how you run a business operation. You got to plan, and you got to have your short-term plan, and your long-term plan, and your strategic overall plan. And the sad truth is, what I'm doing right now was not planned. This is just the result of a window that opened up,
right,
and people started to see what was going on, and once they saw, it got more and more open. So it's a little bit random that I'm here.
Sure.
It wasn't planned, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get that.
And I don't even know if you could. I don't know if I could plan. Tim Ferriss, who's a great guy. He's been great to me, and he's a funny guy. We have a good time, but like the things that he did, like one example is like A/B testing on stuff, right?
Right.
And when I was reading his book and he's talking about A/B testing and how we figure out what things are like, I never did any of that, right? So that would be what a good plan would be, right? And Tim Ferriss, obviously, he planned and he's been very successful with that. I didn't do that. I just kind of did what I'm doing, and it turns out to be successful, or it turns out that people dig it. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of counterintuitive. You would think that I had this big, overarching goal to make these things happen, and I'm going to get. It's like, no, I'm going to do what I like to do, and I happen to live in a day and age when it can be easily propagated throughout the world through a free podcast. And there you go. Here it is.
That's kind of the point that I was alluding to earlier is, you talked about doing what you want to do, not taking into consideration as much as what other people want you to do or living somebody else's life. And that's kind of the point I was making is that, I mean, I look at it, I'm attracted to it, but someone may not be, but it seems like it's just not a factor. It's like, we'll just find the right people who are attracted to what we're doing. And if they're not, then that's okay too.
Yeah. It's one of those dichotomies. And I actually talk about this in the new book as well, is like, don't care. And it's weird because, you, as a leader, you don't care. You can't care. This might make the troops mad if I do this. You can't care about that. At the same time, you absolutely have to care of, if you're developing an antagonistic relationship with your troops, that's not good. So you can't care about what they think, but you have to absolutely care about what they think.
Sure.
And that's the reality of leadership.
And that's why I think it's so hard, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, with this, we've had thousands and thousands of years of leadership training and information, right? This isn't new stuff necessarily, but it's also something that we don't fully comprehend and understand and even apply in our lives. I mean, you're not teaching new things necessarily.
Yeah. I was working with a really, really, really big individual business leader in the world. Mm-hmm. And I was going to work with his company and small portions of his other companies. But first we sat down and ate some food, and he was just kind of grilling me about stuff and asking me questions. We were just talking. But one of the things he kind of said, it's like, you're in this world now of leadership consulting, mm-hmm. right? And there's so many people, and he says, kind of like, what is it that you do why are you rising to the top of this thing? Why is your company, Ashlin, why is it rising to the top of this? And I was about to go and talk to his team. And I didn't say it in an arrogant way, but I basically got across to him, just wait until, let me talk to your team, and you'll kind of see what it is that's different. And, he kind of said, oh, okay, I get it, and then when we got done, we talked afterwards, and he's like, okay, I get it. I see it. The way we're explaining things, the examples that we give, the way that we understand the dynamics of teams. And it's just at Echelon Front, we package this stuff together in a way that people can understand it in a more holistic way now than really anyone's ever done. And part of the reason is, and this is to me is the most important part, we say leadership is the most important thing on the battlefield. We believe it, but beyond believe it, we actually know it to be true.
Because you've lived it.
We've lived it. We actually know, without a doubt, that leadership is the most important thing on the battlefield in business and life. Like, I know that 100%. And there's not too many things that I claim to know 100%. I know that 100%. So when you get someone that goes and someone not from Echelon Front, some other leadership consultancy that says, hey, here's leadership and here's how it can help you, and they give their cut, right? I don't really see people that have the fundamental core belief and understanding that we absolutely know to be factually true and undeniable, and that is that leadership is the most important thing. So if you don't really believe that, if you don't really believe it, if you haven't lived it, it doesn't come across that way.
No doubt.
And if it doesn't come across that way, well, then people don't receive it the same way. And so that's I think one of the key differences of why we're taking things that are thousands of years old, in some cases hundreds of years old. Cover and move is a little bit more modern, but even that, you used to have archers and cavalry going in. Yeah. So they're all old principles. And we said that in Extreme Ownership. We said it like, hey, we didn't make this stuff up. You can find this stuff in throughout history. but we did take it and we did break it down into a way that people could understand it. And we've actually seen and lived through the results. And now we've seen and lived through the results, not just on the battlefield, but through multiple businesses.
Right.
Not only businesses that we work with, but like businesses that I own, right?
Right.
Businesses that I own. I got asked this question the other day. It was the same question it wasn't yours. You said, how have I been so successful? But someone asked me a similar question, which is, how are these businesses that you have so successful?
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised that the question got asked because the answer is real obvious. You know how the businesses that I run or that I own are so successful? We follow the principles that we talk about all the time.
Right.
We use, we cover and move for each other. We keep things simple, right? We prioritize and execute and attack the biggest problems that we got. We use decentralized command, and then we balance all these dichotomies and we take ownership. Like, that's what we do. That's what we do every day.
Right.
So the businesses that I own, that's what's happening at the businesses, and therefore the businesses do well.
Yeah.
It
works.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah, it works exactly, and that's it's great to see that with Origin. And Pete, my partner at Origin, like he took extreme ownership and got it to his troops and his leaders, his subordinate leaders, and the leaders at Origin, and they're into it and they get it.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things, and Pete's the same way. Pete gets it, and he had, Pete's been through a lot,
Sure.
and he's run businesses before. He's had businesses fail, so he's been for a while. He's learned a lot the school of hard knocks, right? But what's good about Pete is, since he's been through all this stuff, when he read extreme ownership, when he went to the muster, he could apply what he's already been through. So he had like immediate understanding. He knows that leadership is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's seen it go in both directions. So there's examples of, hey, how these things work and why they work. They work because we follow the principles that I talk about all the time.
So just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see how that would definitely be valuable to you. It's interesting because we live in this society where you can just throw your stuff up on Instagram or whatever else and say you've done everything, but you talk about living it. Not only have you lived it, you've lived it at quite literally the highest stakes possible.
Yeah, I mean that's what combat is.
Yeah.
Combat is the ultimate consequences, one way or the other.
How do you decide because you talked about earlier having all these ideas and you're never at a loss for things you want to do and get out there into the world. How do you decide what to pursue and when?
It's a challenge. I have to look at the ROI, and when I say ROI, I'm not just talking about the financial ROI. In fact, that's pretty low on the spectrum. I have to look at the ROI on what this is going to bring me,
mm-hmm.
and what it's going to bring. When I talk about the return on investment, I look at it not from what it's going to bring me, what it's going to bring other people. So if I look at Way of the Warrior Kid, I'm thinking to myself, that's going to help a lot of people. I'm going to do that. If I say, hey, when we started deciding to make supplements, I'm like, okay, what's the ROI on this? Not in terms of, hey, what's this going to make me,
mm-hmm.
but what is other people? How can this help other people? Because in my opinion, if what you're doing is helping other people, the ROI financially is going to come.
That'll take care of itself.
That'll take care of itself. So that's kind of the lower priority for me. If I know if I make good things, it's going to help people, and things will work out in the end. So when I'm looking at things, I look at, okay, how is this going to help? How is this going to help people? And if it's going to help people, the one that's going to help the most people, that's what I'm going to do. And that's the same thing with Echelon Front. Like, okay, I know leadership can help and change and transform companies and businesses and teams. That's a huge ROI for people. That's where I started.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like you've got a lot on your plate, and to be able to balance that is something I look at and think, man, that's pretty impressive with everything that you've got going on, to be able to balance these things and having the right orders and the right priorities and manage those things effectively.
Yeah, well, I got awesome people that I work with all the time, whether it's Leif and the rest of the guys at Echelon Front, JP, I know you've had JP on here before.
Yeah,
but
he's coming on this afternoon as well.
Yeah, JP is running giant swath of stuff at Echelon Front.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because that's what JP does. And, JP, I will trust him with anything, like, hey, JP, if I need something done, I know 100% JP is going to make it happen. And so when I have a bunch of people like that, I mean, it becomes very easy. The challenges that you're talking about become very easy because I got my friends and my bros that are actually making it happen.
Yeah.
Makes it easy life for me.
Yeah. How do you determine, because you've got a great crew, JP, of course, and Dave and Leif and Mike and everybody. How do you determine who you're going to bring into the fold, if you will?
That's a good question. At this point, we're still kind of with our at this point, we're still with our brothers in arms at this point. So it's going to have to transform at some point where we start bringing in people that weren't with us, that didn't serve with us. And you know what? That's fine. I mean, I never worked with Pete. Pete was never even in the military. But, Brian from Origin Labs, he was never in the military. These are guys that I met, and, you have that process of feeling out. And, for Pete, I was looking at Pete's track record at what he had done and where his passion was and what he cared about. And when you have someone that cares about the same thing that you care about, and when those are aligned, everything gets pretty easy. And Pete is a big personality, but Pete puts his ego in check. Pete and I have conversations that are, we're making big decisions, and it takes us, I would say, 3 minutes to have a conversation, but a lot of times we're actually making legit decisions in text. Hey,
is that
what
right?
do you think of this? I like it. Go. Or, he'll say, this seems bad. And I'll say, agreed. Stop or whatever. Or, I'll say to him, hey, I don't like this. And he'll say, call me. Right? And he'll say, here's what's going on. Give me some backstory. Oh, got it. I didn't know that. Cool. Execute. You know what I mean? And so neither one of us, we don't agree on everything. We agree on a lot, to be honest with you. I don't make it sound that bad, but we agree on almost everything, as a matter of fact. He sent me an email the other day. It was probably 2 pages worth of email, and I sent him a text very quickly thereafter, faster than someone could have read that email. And then we talked later. I said, hey man,
I didn't read the whole thing.
I'm glad you sent me that big long email. I said I read that thing in 15 seconds because every paragraph I read one line and knew exactly what you were going to say, and I was in 100% agreement. And boom, go. So yeah, like I said. So at Echelon Front, we're at a point now where we're starting to look at some other people coming on board, and where we're going to have to, and we want to, because we work with people all the time, whether they're in other military branches or civilians that are actually doing a great job using the principles that we taught them to execute. And that's nice because some people, they have an aversion to the military mindset.
Yeah.
And they don't understand that the good leadership, whether it's in the military,
transcends all of it.
Just because someone has a shaved head and a uniform on, the leadership principles are the same as somebody that's running a dang marijuana dispensary in wherever, in Denver or whatever, in Maine.
Pete and I are actually wondering when we're going to get you to grow a beard.
Yeah, I probably won't be growing a beard. I mean, for me, it's just the same thing with hair. It's just a pragmatic thing. I don't really care about how I look, and the only thing I care about really is just winning. And so
it was
hair
funny
and a beard will not help me win.
I told Pete, I was like, no, because I don't know how I got talking about him. We were talking about it. I'm like, no, he wouldn't grow a beard. And I'm like, he would use the term tactical disadvantage.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it is. I mean, if you think about getting in some kind of a fight, I mean, somebody grabs a hold of your beard, that's going to be a real problem.
Yeah. I lose a little bit every time we're
I think
out
the
on
real
maps.
question is, when are you shaving your beard? Now that you're training jiu-jitsu, that's got to be a bit of an issue.
It's definitely a concern and a thought.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's always, when I started getting a crew cut, that was sort of a thing like, hey, guess what? I'm not really too concerned. I'm not trying to hide anything, and B, I don't really care.
Yeah. I want to ask you about social media, because you've done some interesting things with social media over, I don't know, maybe the past month or two, where you seem to me like, I don't know if loosened up is the right term, but you've shown maybe a different side of things than you have in the past. Would you agree with that?
I'm sure you're talking about the fact that I posted some videos of me
cooking
making
food.
a salad.
Yeah, that was one of them, which was hilarious.
Me mixing up a mulk. Me shooting my bow and arrow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's about it.
I think you were playing around with your son one day or something.
Oh, yeah. And then my son.
Yeah.
that was just funny. Yeah, my daughters are home from college, and they're sort of like, oh, you got to put this on there. That would be so cool. Cool, whatever.
Fine, do it.
Yeah, no factor. I am the way I am, and as you know, you can't fake a personality for 500 hours of talking on the internet, like
be quite the feat if you could, but yeah,
you can't do it.
Right.
And, it's something Joe Rogan's pointed that out multiple times, and you can't do that. You can't do that. You could try, but people are eventually going to see through it, or you're going to come across as fake,
or you're going to burn out and fade away into obscurity.
Yeah. So so you are who you are, and if people have the impression that I'm, walking around all the time, carrying a kettlebell in one hand and a pistol in the other, that's just unrealistic.
Sure.
I have a wife and 4 kids. I have to do normal human things like make lunch when my wife's not around or whatever. And
that lunch video was good.
Yeah. So yeah, it's cool. But I didn't really think too much about it.
Yeah.
It's not like I have some grand master plan. I think it just came from my my middle daughter was saying, let me shoot let me film you doing that. That's so funny or whatever.
Right.
That's kind of where it started.
I like it. All right, I'm gonna let you go. We got things to do. I do want to ask you a question. I've asked you this. I think this is fourth time we've had the conversation on the podcast, but I've never not asked somebody what it means to be a man.
I don't know what I've said the other times, but I'll say, do what you're supposed to do. Pretty straightforward. A man does what he's supposed to do, and we all know what we're supposed to do. So go do it.
Right on. We'll leave it there.
Right on.
I would ask how guys connect with you. I actually talked to somebody who didn't know you the other day, and that boggled my mind. So I was going to say, how do we connect with you? But the guys know where to go. But the book comes out January 20th, I believe. Yep. January 20th. Pre-orders, I think it's available for
pre-order it's available
now.
Right now. Yep.
Anything else you want to mention? Listen to the podcast.
Yeah, I got a podcast called Jocko Podcast. I got a kids podcast called Warrior Kid Podcast, which is people are super stoked on that, and I don't put them out as often as I should. There's 20 something of them right now, and I'll try and put out more, but it's challenging. I write a story for each one, which takes a little bit more time. Maybe I'll go back. I do some Q&A as well. So anyways, yeah, there's a Warrior Kid podcast, really good. Some of those Warrior Kid podcasts, I tell stories from Uncle Jake when Uncle Jake was a kid. And my goal is to explain to kids how Uncle Jake got his values through very simple parables where they can understand, oh, you're not the center of the universe. Oh, you should be prepared. Oh, you shouldn't make fun of other people. There's these kind of simple things that kids should know. And so that's the Warrior Kid podcast.
How many kids call you Uncle Jake?
A lot of kids call me Uncle Jake.
I bet.
A lot of kids call me Uncle Jake. They think I'm Uncle Jake,
Yeah.
So it's all good.
It's good.
And on the podcast, on the Warrior Kid podcast, I kind of leave it in the air a little bit.
As to you might be
As
Uncle
I might.
Jake?
I just don't clarify one way or
Right.
the other because, that's what the kids want to hear. They
Right.
want to hear
Sure.
They want to hear Uncle Jake. You'll hear my voice is different when I do it. Just a little bit different. It's aimed at kids.
Sure.
So I
No
talk
doubt.
a little bit, just in a little bit of a nicer voice that the kids can, must be Uncle Jake talking. Just have a little bit different tone to it. Cause when I talk to kids, you got to put a little bit of character on the voice so it keeps them a little bit more engaged.
No
so,
doubt.
And I've never really thought about that until right this minute. Cause I'm thinking, why do I do that? Well, that's the reason. Cause I want kids to be more engaged and be able to listen.
Well, it's a leadership principle.
Yeah.
You got to be able to communicate effectively with your audience.
Yes, you got to know that audience.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's about it. Yeah, I got some books and hopefully go train jiu-jitsu and do what you're supposed to do.
Right on. We'll sync it all up. Jocko, I appreciate you. Appreciate our friendship. Appreciate you imparting your wisdom on us, and looking forward to getting some more rolling in this week.
Right on, man.
Thanks,
awesome.
brother.
Thanks.